This is madness. ARD is now reporting neutrally to even positively about Bitcoins. We are not used to this. In the new ARD podcast, an expert talks about Bitcoin, explains it extremely well, and even says that he regrets not having bought Bitcoin earlier or being involved from the beginning. He massively underestimated it, and now he is talking here about a Bitcoin price explosion. Donald Trump, a strategic Bitcoin reserve. This means we are now seeing in the public media in Germany how there is active discussion about a strategic Bitcoin reserve, how Bitcoin is being discussed as an asset, and how there is also talk about the fascinating technology behind Bitcoin. I have often criticized the public media because they reported very poorly about Bitcoin. ZDF or whoever has reported negatively about Bitcoin here. I also have to revise my stance. When positive reporting occurs, I clearly say, hey, you did a great job, you really did well. You have to give a thumbs up for that. And now we will look at the best excerpts from this podcast. And in the end, I will also give you my assessment on it.
Make Bitcoin great again. Donald Trump promised during his campaign to make the USA the global crypto hub. As soon as he was elected, Bitcoin skyrocketed. Could the cryptocurrency even replace the dollar as the global reserve currency in the future? 2001. We will discuss this with NDR economic expert Nicholas Leven. He explains to us how Elon Musk is involved and whether it is still a good idea to get into the Bitcoin game now. You are listening to 11 Kilometers, The Daily Shop.
So you can see it starts right away with the opportunities. Like many other reports, it doesn't frame negatively at the beginning, saying Bitcoin is a bubble, a speculative bubble or something like that, but rather reports on the price explosion and what potential opportunities Bitcoin has and what is behind it.
Bitcoin is booming and the Bitcoin price is skyrocketing. Nicholas, as an economic journalist, did you see this coming?
To be honest, I didn't see it coming at all. I have been dealing with it for a while, even years ago. At some point, I went to a meeting, a Bitcoin meeting with, let's say, some nerds. They were mostly young guys who were totally fascinated by Bitcoin, and I was there. It was a kind of pub in Hamburg, and I watched it. And they were, as I said, all completely enthusiastic about it, and I couldn't really understand it. And I remember that they were totally fixated and also in their bubble discussing blockchain and mining and how it all works and that it would change the whole world.
When was it that you were at this meeting?
Yes, that was around 2016. And I also told my friends at that meeting, it's great that you are so enthusiastic. But from my perspective, this will never amount to anything. And at that time, hold on, Bitcoin cost around $700 or $800, and that was it. And I thought, no, friends, and now at 90. Yes, I should have gotten in then, but I didn't.
Now the value of Bitcoin has increased dramatically, more than doubled just since the beginning of the year. Explain to us, why has Bitcoin surged so much in the last few months?
So there are many, many reasons, but one of the main reasons was that Bitcoin funds were approved in the USA. And these funds have actually been a gateway in the USA saying, hey, friends, now you can join the game. It's like that.
So I find it quite amazing that it is admitted here that they have underestimated the whole thing. Here, Bitcoin meetups are being discussed. That is also exactly my euphoria, which you might be able to sense through the videos. This is exactly the category of people he is talking about, that people really see the opportunity for a sustainable change because we suddenly have hard money again. We suddenly have transparent, fair money again. And this can obviously have so much positive impact in our world that it's hard to imagine, or very few people can still imagine it right now, which is why many underestimate it, but more and more people like this expert, like ARD here, or for example, also Michael Saylor or Larry Fink and so on, who initially bet massively against Bitcoin, or Donald Trump, who are now suddenly realizing, hey, maybe I need to rethink this. Maybe I was actually wrong in my way of thinking, and I need to open myself up to Bitcoin now because it has so many advantages for me as well. And it's great to see that we now have this shift from Bitcoin is negligible, it's just speculation, to hey, I underestimated it and wish I had bought it earlier. And then there will also be a discussion about Bitcoin ETFs next. Pros and cons that a lot of new capital can come in through Bitcoin ETFs. It is also said that Bitcoin ETFs are partly to be preferred here because it is simply much easier access. I wouldn't say that. Get yourself a hardware wallet. I'll put a link below to the Trezor hardware wallet. Super easy. You can store Bitcoin yourself here, and it's best not to buy your Bitcoin through an ETF, but for example, at 21 Bitcoin or from me, also on another exchange. But you don't need to invest in Bitcoin ETFs here because you have all the advantages like censorship resistance and so on that you don't have with direct direct purchase and direct holding of Bitcoin. So feel free to check it out. At 21 Bitcoin, you even get a discount with the code Bitcoin Hotel when you buy Bitcoin here. But you can also use something else, another exchange or something like that. You can also use another hardware wallet, just be clear. Bitcoin ETFs are not real Bitcoin. This is being promoted in the report, saying that Bitcoin ETFs are now super great. Yes, for institutional investors maybe, but for a private investor, it usually doesn't make sense. However, no nonsense or anything like that is spread here. Rather, it is just argued slightly positively. The Bitcoin ETFs.
Donald Trump stirs emotions and prices. 2% in just 3 weeks. That's how much the Bitcoin price has skyrocketed since the Trump election.
Why did Donald Trump's election give Bitcoin such a boost?
You have to go back a bit. Donald Trump was at a big crypto event, a crypto conference, and he told all these crypto fans, I am your crypto president, and when I take the helm, I will open the door.
I'm laying out my plan to ensure that the United States will be the crypto capital of the planet and the Bitcoin superpower of the world, and we'll get it done.
That means we will keep the reins loose, no strict regulation in that regard.
Not America to be the nation that leads the way, and this was going to have...
We will definitely do a lot to promote Bitcoin, and we will also fill the positions accordingly.
We're going to let it grow on day one. I will fire Gary Gensler and appoint a new...
The head of the stock exchange regulator announced just a few days ago that he will resign as soon as Donald Trump moves into the White House. And many have already positioned themselves and said that when he takes the helm, there will be a real boost, and then he was elected. And since then, as mentioned, in anticipation, joyful expectations of what may come with the inauguration, everyone is currently investing heavily as they expect a significant boost.
So Trump promises in the election campaign that he wants to make the USA a Bitcoin center. And he has also said how he plans to do that.
The point where hopes currently lie is that the USA will establish a kind of currency reserve with Bitcoin.
Announce that if I am elected, it will be the policy of the administration of the United States of America to keep 100% of all the Bitcoin.
This would mean nothing less than that the American Central Bank would buy hundreds of billions of dollars, perhaps even much more, in Bitcoin on the market and simply, let's say, simplify it by putting it in the vault and waiting to see how the price develops.
In the end, this will be the core of the strategic national Bitcoin stockpile.
This is what everyone is currently betting on, that there may be this currency reserve made of Bitcoin in the USA.
I will be the pro-Bitcoin president that America needs and our citizens deserve.
Now, one might ask what Donald Trump has to gain from this. From my perspective, and I cannot prove this now, and others see it quite differently, I believe that there will not be this currency reserve in Bitcoin in 2021. I consider it nearly impossible, but I am also open to being proven wrong.
Why do you think that is not so promising?
So if Donald Trump becomes president and then suddenly one buys currency reserves with Bitcoin and possibly invests $1 trillion, and then we see with Bitcoin what we have seen in recent years, namely great volatility, large price fluctuations, sudden crashes due to loss of trust, whatever it may be, and then this investment is suddenly no longer $1 trillion or the hoped-for price increases, but the exact opposite happens, and suddenly the currency reserve is only worth $100 billion or even less. Then such a president comes under massive pressure, and I cannot imagine that one would take on this risk. A risk that can, of course, arise very quickly. We have seen such price crashes over and over again in the past.
So that I experience again that a strategic Bitcoin reserve is actually being discussed here on ARD. And I also think the expert has a really good assessment here because he is quite ultra bullish. However, he is also not completely opposed. He simply says that, in his opinion, it is not very likely, and I have to agree with that more and more. At first, I was very bullish about the strategic Bitcoin reserve, since Donald Trump has been making increasingly confusing statements about the dollar and Bitcoin. I have become more uncertain about whether this will happen and whether Donald Trump really understands what they are actually planning, because it is true that El Salvador experienced something similar. One really has to be super committed and very convinced of Bitcoin to pull something like this off, because El Salvador, when they introduced the strategic Bitcoin reserve, were also in a bear market for about 2 years and then faced massive backlash, including from the media. Something similar could, of course, also happen to Donald Trump, that he might initially drift into a bear market, Although on the other hand, it would also trigger massive reactions if the USA were to put Bitcoin into the strategic Bitcoin reserve. So I don't think as negatively as the expert here, because I do assume that when the USA announces it, it will initially go massively to the moon, and prices of Bitcoin and more are very, very likely because it will simply trigger a chain effect. But it is not guaranteed that this chain effect will happen. And if one drifts into a bear market here, it could cost Donald Trump the presidency, because then people would say, hey, you gambled away all our money, even though maybe 3 or 4 years later the Bitcoin price would rise again and Donald Trump might, let's say, be in a good position again. But by then, the next election period would have come and he might already be voted out or something like that. This means the danger that the expert describes definitely exists.
Severe price fluctuations are therefore not good for a so-called currency reserve. Nicholas, please explain how the currency Bitcoin differs from traditional currencies in 2001.
Yes, so Bitcoin differs from the so-called traditional currencies like the dollar and euro, that it is not centrally controlled and cannot be issued centrally. In other words, central banks simply print more money when additional funds are needed or when loans need to be taken out. With Bitcoin, it is completely different. It is limited to 21 million pieces, but it will still take about 140 years until they are all mined. Currently, I believe there are 19.7 million in circulation. Nothing can be printed anymore. Once they are all mined, it will be it. And above all, it is not centrally controlled. Rather, all payment transactions and everything that happens with Bitcoin is monitored through the network. There are many computers, simply put, connected in this network, and all transactions, everything that happens with Bitcoin, is monitored in parallel by everyone who is active in the network, which is why it is decentralized. And that's why it is always said to be tamper-proof. You can manipulate a single computer, maybe even two, but you cannot manipulate all computers. Therefore, it is particularly secure. The technology behind it is indeed a bit fascinating. There's no other way to say it.
So I am really fascinated by how Bitcoin is argued about in a neutral to slightly positive way. In the end, he also mentions the risks of Bitcoin, emphasizing that one must pay close attention to its volatility. He also advises against massively buying Bitcoin or anything like that. But we don't even need an ultra bullish reporting here. One is asking ARD or ZDF to simply say, A, Bitcoin is the greatest invention of all time, and so on. Rather, it is sufficient to remain neutral, to simply debate the pros and cons, as he says, being independent of central banks, a decentralized system that is not so easily hijacked, not so easily hacked, broken, and so on. And that is already a very, very good movement that you see here, and it makes me ultra bullish, even more bullish about the future. Please let me know in the comments what you think about this. Also, feel free to subscribe here. It is really important for us to gain more traction with this channel. The more subscriptions we have here, the better guests we can invite, the better content we can create, and the more people we can inspire about Bitcoin. So definitely hit the subscribe button below. We'll see you. Thanks for watching. Peace out, you send.